Good morning, friends. Welcome to our show. Lou, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are we doing? I know you've been very excited about this particular episode, and it's gotten me excited about this episode, so I'm ready to get going.
Yes, I think, friends, you are going to be in for a treat. I love this particular part of the Gita for a number of reasons, which I can explain to you as to why I like it. But I have searched everywhere. I've searched through a lot of different swamis who I listened to and heard and read, and I don't get this kind of explanation that I'm putting forward to you. And it's just purely out of chance that I happen to be on it. And I'd love for you to look at it, listen to it, and then tell me what you think. But I think you're going to be blown away by what is about to come. What do you think about that as an introduction, Lou?
It's a very good introduction, and you seeded a couple of things about what's going to go on in this episode, and I'm just fascinated and excited. And a lot of this is hard to believe that they had these types of knowledges and things dating back that far.
Well, that's it's a good segue. Yes, how much knowledge they had and how far back it goes is just so fascinating. Now, as it turns out, the way I came across a lot of the explanations for this, I will show you, goes to the origin of the Sphinx, the Naphtapalaya megaliths in the Middle East, and so on, which all ties together, going back like 11,000 BCE. So that's 11 plus 2, 13,000 years ago. And this is so fascinating. You're talking about how far back these people, the ancients, knew all of this. I have no idea how many thousands of years it goes back. But friends, as you listen to this, as I told you, you'll be blown away. And you please do your own research. After you hear this, go to the internet, go to look at books, and then see what I'm saying, if it makes sense to you or not. I believe it will. But here's where your comments, your questions on Facebook would be very, very helpful to me. If you can ask, and if we are putting these videos on YouTube, you can ask on YouTube also. But let's get started. Growing up, from the time I was a child, anytime something really bad happened, all around me in India, people would say, oh, well, what do you expect? This is Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga. So what is Yuga? Yuga is essentially an eon or an epoch, a time, a great period of time. And just so you know that Luke, can we show that handwritten piece, please?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks, Lou. So there are 4 earthly yugas. The first one is called Satya Yuga. Satya means truth. Satya Yuga lasts for 1,728,000 years, our years, terrestrial years, earthly years. That's the first. That is, okay, let's go to the second, which is Treta Yuga, 1,296,000 years. Dwapar Yuga, which is the third, 864,000 years. And Kali Yuga, where we are right now, 432,000 years. Now, anybody that looks at these numbers, which are on the screen, will see that all of these are multiples of 432,000, 432,000. So if Kali Yuga, which is the shortest, is 1 unit, which is 432, 2 units is exactly 864, which is Dwapar Yuga. 3 units is 1,296,000, which is 1.296 million. And Satya Yuga is 1.728 million, which is 4 units of 432. So the ratio is 4 is to 3 is to 2 is to 1, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Right.
And the way the Hindu mythology depicts this is that in Satya Yuga, it's shown as a cow with 4 legs. Treta Yuga, one of the legs disappears and the cow is standing on 3 legs. In Dwapar Yuga, it's standing on 2 legs. And in Kali Yuga, it's said The cow is shown to be standing on one leg. Now, if you total all those numbers, if you don't mind, Luke, could you put that back up?
Oh, hang on, give me 1 second here.
Or I can show it here.
I'd already switched over to an X graphics.
Okay.
I can pick that back up. Hang on, go ahead.
Okay, so if you total all these, it comes to exactly 4,320,000 years. That is one Mahayuga. Maha in Sanskrit means great. One great yuga is 4,320,000 years. That seems like a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does.
But what the scriptures say, and this, the Gita doesn't say this. The Gita, when we finish this explanation, I'll go through the verses 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, because otherwise that won't make sense to you. The scriptures say that one day of Brahma is equal to 1,000 Mahayugas. Now, if you look at the screen, you see one Mahayuga is 4.32 million years.
Right.
So 1,000 Mahayugas would be 4.32 billion years. And that is considered one day of the creator, Brahma. In Sanskrit, it's called Kalpasarga, and which is the period of creation. Kalpasarga means period of creation. That's when the universe was created. Now, we say created in English. The Sanskrit actually doesn't say created, because creation means it was made from something. We say, in essence, it was projected. One day of projection of the universe, as if you have a seed, and from the seed comes a plant or a tree, and a big oak tree comes from that seed.
Oh, I see. Yep.
The tree wasn't created by the plant. It just projected out of that seed. The tree wasn't created from the seed. It projected out.
Right.
It was so let's say you have a baby. A baby's born, right? Baby's not created at that time. You don't say a baby was created. The baby was created inside the womb. It was already there. It was the seed.
Right.
It projected out when it was born. You just became aware of that child after it was born. So it's not a period of creation. That's a misnomer. It's a period of projection, of being aware. So bear with me, because we'll see how the universe was created in this one day of Brahma. It was projected out, and that was the Big Bang that Lou is very interested in. Lou has always talked about the Big Bang. Basically, at that time, at the beginning, everything was one pinpoint. There was no space. There was no time. There was no anything. And
Right.
from that, immediately at the time of that Big Bang came helium and various other gases, which then just exploded into the sun, the different planets. You know, it's like turning on your computer. You know, when you turn on one of these older computers, it comes on a little bit at a time, boom, 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 but very quickly. And that's exactly what happened at the Big Bang, at the creation, at the day of Brahma, when it starts, boom, 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 all the planets get created and they start moving apart. So it takes them 4.320 million, which is, billion years for that expansion to take place. So that is during the day. And during that one day, during that 4.32 billion, the universe just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding, going further and further away, all the planets from each other. Halfway through that day, which is half of 4.32 billion, that is 2.16 billion years, comes the midpoint of that day. And that's when the planet starts to come together again. Everything starts to coalesce, start to come together. And that then begins the afternoon and evening of that day of Brahman until nighttime comes. And then begins the night of Brahma, which is another 1,000 Mahayugas, which is another 4.32 billion years. And during that night, everything comes together. It becomes one pinpoint. Everything's destroyed. Everything's gone back into one little pinpoint. And that stays like that, dormant, like a seed. It's not gone. It is 4.32 billion. It stays like that.
Right.
Now, when you turn your computer off, same thing happens, right? You turn your computer off, everything sort of starts one by one. These apps start to disappear from your screen. You're watching it, making sure it's turning off. Bing, 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 bing. Different computer apps start to go, and then it may even ask you, should you resure you want to turn your computer off? And if you don't answer within 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it goes, and boom, then there's darkness. So that's what happens in a night of Brahma, which is also in Sanskrit known as pralaya, or a period of dissolution. And we will talk about this as we go on, which is the period of creation or projection and the period of dissolution. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the Satya Yuga, during that period of Satya Yuga, everything is truthful. People are honest, and that's the longest period, right? So during that time, and our scriptures show that there have been periods of time like this, and they describe what all people were capable of that time. It's fascinating if you read that. People who lived during Satya Yuga, doors were always never locked. There was no such thing as locks, because nobody ever stole anything. Everybody was honest. There were no murders. There were no crimes. There were no police, no jails, no punishment. People were moral. People were upstanding. People had great mental powers at that time. During the next one, which was Treta Yuga, then at that time during Treta Yuga, you lost 1/4 or 125% of that mental ability, that honesty, that's morality, all of that. Mm-hmm. Then in Dwapar Yuga, you lost another quarter, 25%. That's like those legs of the four-legged cow. And during Kali Yuga, you're left with just 1/4 of that morality, which is, and they say during Kali Yuga, you have the maximum level of immorality, crimes, murders, bad things happen, people are dishonest, and all kinds of everything bad that you could consider happens during Kali Yuga. Now, so far, I'm telling you what is written in the scriptures. What it does, what the scriptures don't explain, nor any of the Swamis that I've listened to explain, or wherever you can find, is why does this take place?
Right.
To that, let's go to the second diagram with these. Now, everybody, please recognize that, by the way, both these were hand-drawn by me. So forgive my artistic inexperience with this and with the earlier handwriting. But most of us do not know that our sun revolves around something else. Most of us think, most of us know that the earth revolves around the sun.
Right.
Now, if you look on this diagram, if you look at the lower left corner, you'll see the sun, which is yellow, and our earth, which is blue and green, and our earth is revolving around the earth in a elliptical fashion. Now, what I've shown in this diagram is right in the center is this red circle marked GC, which stands for galactic center. The sun takes many thousands of years to go completely around the galactic center. But the sun does move. People don't know that. The sun moves.
Yes.
Now, the sun revolves around the galactic center in an ellipse. It's not in a circle. And the earth revolves around the sun in an ellipse. I think most people know that. And the reason for that is because of the gravitational pull of the sun on the earth. It makes it therefore revolve in an ellipse. Is this getting too confusing, Lou?
No.
I hope not.
No. Most people are aware of this, I think.
Okay, good. So the sun also revolves in an elliptical fashion. So if you look at this ellipse that I've drawn around here, you will see that the point that I've marked is 0 point. The sun is closest to the galactic center, and the earth at the point that it is between the sun and the galactic center is closest to the galactic center. And as it moves to the tip of that ellipse, the sun is furthest away from the galactic center, and the earth, when it is at the December 21 point, is furthest away from the galactic center that it will ever be.
Right.
Now that is In this diagram, I've marked it as point B. That's the one that is in the left lower corner. And that is considered the peak of Kali Yuga, when there is the least influence on the galactic center, on the sun, on the earth, I'm sorry, on
Right.
human beings. So what that indicates is that in Satya Yuga, the earth is closest to the galactic center. And as we said before, that the scriptures tell us that when you're in Satya Yuga, human beings are honest, decent, moral, upstanding. There's no crime. They're full of life and they live for long, long periods of time. Does that mean that the galactic center is really our batteries charging us? That when we're close to the galactic center, we are full of energy, honest, moral, decent, no crime, etc. And that when we're in Kali Yuga and we're at the other peak, or furthest away from the galactic center, we are least charged, and therefore we are immoral, dishonest, criminal in nature, and bad things happen. Consider this. All planets are known to have an effect on us to some extent or the other.
Right.
Right? We know that the moon has an effect on the waves of the ocean. The moon has an effect on the female physiology, menstrual cycles, pregnancies, exactly to the day of the moon's influence on the female body. The sun, we know, has an influence on us, right?
Well, you ask any first responder, you ask any doctor, you ask any teacher about what happens at full moon with people's psyches and reactions, and they'll have stories for you.
Any psychiatrist too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so the full moon, the sun. Now people say, well, sun doesn't have an effect on people. Yes, it does. We know about what happens when the sun rises. The rajas comes out in people. They get full of energy, and when the sun goes down, you start to say, I want to sit down and become tamasic. That's when you want to start drinking, you want to put your feet up, you want to watch TV, you don't have the energy. All kinds of other influences come out. That's just the sun. And the sun is nowhere near as powerful as the galactic center as far as its influence on us. Now,
Right.
when I was in school, at one of the earlier grades, I remember a teacher had given us an experiment. She took these broad seeds, and made us put it in like 2 plastic containers and in soil. And she made us water it until the seeds started to sprout.
Right.
And the one seed that sprouted, she kept in bright sunlight. And the other seed that was starting to sprout, she put it in a closet where there was no sunlight. And that one that was in the closet, she'd allow us to take it out and give it a little bit of sun during the day and then put it back in the closet.
Right. Yep.
Both were watered, both were fertilized, both were in soil, but one got bright sunlight for 8-10 hours a day in India, and the other got just sunlight for maybe an hour or so, or 2 hours. Now, the one that was in the bright sunlight came out like any regular, full-blooded plant, thriving. The one that was in the closet was spindly, long, thin. The leaves were very pale green and very weak.
Mm-hmm.
So it grew, but it was very weak in its character, in its physiology, in its body. And that shows us that even plants respond to where they get their energy from, which is the sun. Now, does that mean the sun gives life to these plants? No. The sun is necessary for the plants, but even then, the sun is not the one that gave that seed its life. The life in that seed came from what we call Brahman. And that life, as we have it, we also, without sun, we would die. But the sun is not what gives us life. It sustains it, but it's not what gives us life.
Right.
Now, in this diagram, you see that as you get closer to the galactic center, we are charged and we're full of life and we're full of morality and full of all kinds of good things. As we get furthest away, as in the lower left-hand corner, you are the exact opposite. So with that in mind, let us then examine what happens to human beings and why this is so important. So let's go back to the world. Now, we talked about these Mahayugas being 4.32 billion years old. So that would mean if our Earth right now is considered to be somewhere between 13.7 billion years to 15 billion years old. Did you know that, Lou?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
there are theories, but yes, that's the current theory.
Yeah, the current theory is that it's many billions of years, which means that we have gone through at least 1, 2, 3 days of Brahma, and 1, 2, possibly maybe somewhere between 4 and 5 cycles of day and night of Brahma,
Right.
which means that our whole universe, cosmos, Earth, Sun, etc., have been created, Big Bang, dissipated, back to pinpoint, created again, back to pinpoint, and each time the life that comes is different. Each time it may not be the same Earth, may not be the same Sun, may be different. It is like snowflakes. Snowflakes coming down, it has been shown that each snowflake has a different pattern, just like
Right.
fingerprints. No two snowflakes are alike, but yet they're all created from the same water vapor. When the water becomes vapor, goes up into the air, comes down as rain, and then freezes, comes down. Each snowflake, even though it's the same constituents, looks different, is different. Similarly, they say that when the world goes back into its pinpoint and then there's a Big Bang again, it's not necessary that the Earth will be the same. It's not necessary that humans look the same, or we are the same. Life could come in different forms or different fashions, and there may be life on other planets because Brahma chose to have life on other planets, but not the same as ours.
Mhm.
But that's the 15 billion years that our world has been around. So we are right now in Kali Yuga, and let me again, just my notes. When Brahma's day begins, creation starts. Not creation, but projection.
Right.
From a single point where there was no matter, no space, no time, then there was a big bang. Matter, such as hydrogen, helium, was formed, then space, then various stars and planets. The world is constantly expanding, as I said. When this day of Brahma ends, the creation starts to wind down towards the midpoint. And this, if you want to look it up, you can look up expansion and contraction of the universe. You
Mhm.
can look up the pulsating universe. You can look up singularity or unicity. There are billions of galaxies around us. They're all moving away from each other till you get to the middle of the day of Brahma. Then they all start to come together and will slowly crunch and come into one single point. And at present, we are around half point. The expansion is slowing down, the contraction has started. When Brahma goes to sleep during his night, and by the way, there is no person such
Right.
as Brahma. It's a force, it's a universe. It's
Right.
maybe it's the galactic center that is our Brahma. When Brahma goes to sleep, everything else goes to sleep. That is known as singularity. This is the pulsating universe. And everything has this expansion and contraction. Just think to yourself, when we started as human beings, we were first one cell, a sperm, and
Right.
an ovum coming together and then multiplying, multiplying, multiplying until we became a full human being, which is 100 trillion cells, not just billion, trillion, 100 trillion, maybe more. Nobody knows how many
Right.
trillions of cells we are. But as we get older and older and older, what happens? From personal experience, the cell starts to die,
Mhm.
and cells get less. We start to diminish, and our body mass, everything starts to shrink. And we are now going towards the tail end of our life. So everything expands and then disintegrates. So 1,000 Mahayugas is one day for Brahma, and 1,000 Mahayugas is one night. So when, okay, now we want to get to the verses, but we want to, before I do that, let me talk about what I said before about how I came across this correlation of the center, galactic center, and the Gita and Upanishads.
Mhm.
Various Vedas talk about this, but nobody anywhere that I've seen gave an explanation of the Earth going around the galactic center. Sorry, the sun going around the galactic center. Nobody gave that. I happened to pick up a book. I'm not an astronomer, but I happened to pick up a book called The Origin Map. You may want to buy this or look at it if you can get it. It was a small, tiny book. It was on Amazon, and it talked about the origin map. It was written by Thomas G. Brophy, PhD, The Origin Map. When I looked at it, I was so fascinated. It was hard to understand, but I'll summarize it briefly for you. Lou, you will get a kick out of this.
Yeah.
Many of you will. What Brophy, Dr. Brophy said is that he went on a trip to Egypt, and they were going on a lot of camels. They were looking for something. They were going to do something. At one point, look at the coincidence, almost like nature, God, some forces want you to find this.
Right.
The people that were riding on the caravan with him said, we need to take a break, cigarette break, relieve yourselves, etc.
Yeah.
So Brophy said, okay, let's stop here. They all got off the camels. These guys went off to smoke and do whatever they had to do. And Brophy was just waiting for them to get back on their camels so they could continue. And he was just kicking his feet in the sand. Now, he's an archaeologist come astronomer.
Right.
So he's kicking his feet in the sand, and he hit something hard. And he said, there's a stone here in this desert where there's lots of snow, hundreds of feet of sand.
Yep.
What is this stone doing here? So he reached down, being an archaeologist, he started to scrape away at the sand. And what his foot had hit was a point. It was actually the point of a megalith, pointing out like that. What a coincidence that he stopped right there.
Can you imagine?
And his foot hit the point of a megalith that was hundreds of feet long, buried inside. And of all the places that he stopped right there. Of all the thing he could have done was he kicked his feet, and of all the things he could have hit was the tip of this megalith. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
So he said, what is this? And when people said, okay, we're ready to get back on the camels, he said, no, we're going to camp here tonight. So they camped. And all night and all day, he was scraping away at this, and he kept going down deeper and deeper until he said, let's camp here. And that place was called Nabta Playa, Nabta, Nabta Playa. Nabta Playa turned out to have megaliths that were pointing up towards the sky. Long story, I'll just make it brief. So he then started into a research to say, when was this built? When were all these Egyptian pyramids and the Sphinx built? And why were they built? They went through so much trouble to build these megaliths that were pointing up towards the sky. And being an astronomer, he said, what the heck were they pointing at over there? So he then said he carbon dated various things and found out when these things were built. And they seem to have been built 11,000 years BCE. And they were pointing to a particular spot in the sky, which, using planetary software, he was able to determine that they were pointing to where the galactic center would have been at that time.
Yeah.
Now,
this is what fascinates me.
Yeah.
Because you can look at astronomy and you can look at what the Greeks did and what the Egyptians did. Stars move, planets move. They could track it. They were paying attention to these things. You can't see the galactic center. You can't see it with normal observation.
You cannot see the galactic center with normal observation. I don't think you can see it even with instruments. In fact, I met Dr. Brophy after that. I researched him, looked for him, flew to California to meet up with him. And he said that he was planning to have in Switzerland develop a wristwatch that basically could tell you at what point, and the only thing, it wouldn't give you time, but it would only tell you at what point we were able to, where we were at that point, be able to face the galactic center. So you could look up and see, know that you were looking up at the galactic center. Mm-hmm. Why was that important? Let me tell you. So anyway, going back, these megaliths were pointing towards the galactic center. And his book then tells you that a lot of these centers, the Egyptian pyramids and the Sphinx, all of these were connected to the fact that 11,000 BCE, they knew that in another 500 years, the galactic center would be the closest to the Earth that it had been, or so. So he then said, how do we know that? But the Sphinx wasn't that old, right? The Sphinx wasn't 10,500 years BCE, nor were the pyramids. So he met up with two other people. One was Robert Schoch, Schoch, Dr. Robert Schoch, and John Anthony West, West, all renowned scholars. And if you read the books that Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, I'm sorry, I didn't write down the names of their books.
Mm-hmm.
What they did was, based on Brophy's research, they went back and they said, how old is the Sphinx? How old are the pyramids? And although we never imagined that they were 11,000 BCE, they found watermarks around the Sphinx and the pyramids. And they said, where could these watermarks have come from?
Right.
And of course, people gave all kinds of theories. What they said was that was during the Great Flood. That means the Great Flood occurred after the Sphinx was created.
Right.
So the Great Flood left its watermarks on the Sphinx, and the Great Flood left its watermark on the pyramids. And so all these megaliths, the Sphinx, the pyramids, and even Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is in, I don't know, Cambodia or Thailand. Sorry? Cambodia.
Yeah, this fascinated me. When you sent the material out, I started looking into this too. This building fascinates me.
Yeah. So the stencils, a person by the name of Stencil in 1976 wrote a research paper on Angkor Wat. And he said that these Vedic things that were so old were basically used to create Angkor Wat. And again, Angkor Wat is pointing to where the galactic center would have been at that time. So, which means that kings and queens back then, and people in royalty, generals, always made their decisions when they thought that during that 1 or 2 hours of each day, then the Earth faced the galactic centers, when they thought that they could make their best decisions. And this is what Brophy was telling me, that the wristwatch would be used to be able to say when our Earth was closest to the galactic center and to make big decisions at that point. And now a lot of kings would then call their wise people to them and say, you tell me when. They didn't know anything about galactic center, but the wise men knew. And the wise men would say, wait till tomorrow around 5 a.m. and that's when we'll do it. And why 5 a.m.? Because the great people said that this is when we are closest to the galactic center. Now, during Satya Yuga, you are closest to the galactic center almost all day, and you don't need to wait for a particular time. During Kali Yuga, Brophy told me, only an hour or two that you may be actually facing the galactic center during any particular time. So that was how we came about the galactic center and the Egyptian pyramids, the Sphinx, etc. So I know this has gone a long time.
Fascinating. Don't apologize.
So verse 15 says, having come to me, the Mahatmas no longer have to be reborn. They have reached the highest perfection. We know that when you have vasanas, you continue to be reborn again and again. But when you've fulfilled your vasanas, you go to Brahman and you don't come back. Verse 16 says, all the worlds up to Brahmaloka, which is the world of Brahma, are subject to return. But on reaching me, there is no return. Now, when he says all the worlds up to Brahmaloka, world of Brahman, the Sanskrit scriptures talk of many different lokas. I don't want to go through all of them, but there's many lokas, which are planets, which are levels of consciousness as you would see it. And when you reach that, you still come back. But when you reach Brahman, it says you do not come back. And now the question in my mind was, is Brahman the galactic center? And just like, plants say, for me, life comes from the sun. It doesn't, but is it as important to us as sun is to us and to the plants? Verse 17, the people who know the day of Brahma, which ends in 1,000 yugas, that's the Mahayuga, and the night, which ends in 1,000 yugas, they know day and night. That's what we just talked about, 1,000 Mahayugas. And then verse 18, at the approach of day, all the manifest stream forth from the unmanifest. At the approach of night, they dissolve there only in what is called the unmanifested. So it's what it's talking about is that during the Big Bang, everything becomes manifest. When it's the night, everything goes back to being a small little pinpoint again.
Expansion and contraction.
Expansion and contraction. So remember the analogy that I gave at the beginning, which is that think of a child being born. He is not created at the time that he's born. He was actually created ahead of time in the womb. He was just projected at the time when he was born. Same thing with a seed being planted and then an oak tree coming out of it. It was just projected at the time.
Right.
And these are all various levels of consciousness, is what somebody has explained this as. Verse 19, this multitude of beings being born again and again is dissolved helplessly at the approach of Brahma's night, and it streams forth again at the approach of day. Saying the same thing that we said before, like water vapor becomes rain and then becomes snowflakes, everything comes like that. Then verse 20, but there exists, now here's something that is different than what we spoke of before, but there exists higher than the unmanifested, yet another unmanifested being with a capital B, eternal, who is not destroyed when all beings are destroyed. So what he's saying here is, you may think that your computer, when it shuts down, is dead or gone, but it isn't. There's still a clock going on there. When you turn the computer back on a day later, it knows exactly what time it is. So there is some life going on inside that computer, even though you have turned it off.
Right.
And Brahman, very different from Brahma. Brahma is considered to be the creator, given a form for the common person to understand.
Right.
But Brahman is really what we've been talking about all these episodes, that Brahman is really the force, the energy, the life, the consciousness behind Brahma, right?
So Brahma is the figurehead of Brahman. It's
Yeah, absolutely right.
a way for us to access it based on what we know. Yeah.
So now, if you look at pictures, drawn pictures of what is depicted as Brahma or Vishnu, Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the maintainer, and Shiva is the destroyer. So those three are the main creator, maintainer, and destroyer of everything. So something is born, then it's maintained, then it dies. And that's the story of everything in this universe. Every being, every piece of equipment, everything, it begins, stays, and then dies.
True.
Brahma is the creator. Now, when you look at depictions on paper, they show like a big stream of milk. And the center of that is a lotus coming out with a long stem. And in Brahma's belly button is where the stem is coming from. Then comes the lotus. And in that lotus is Brahma. So what that represents is that the belly button is the galactic center. And we, as the sun and the earth and all the other planets that are going around the galactic center and going around our sun, are all part of what comes out from the creation. So Brahma is the creator, according to this. Really, we know it's Brahman. And Vishnu is the maintainer. And in this, Vishnu is lying on this bed, which is the galaxy, which is the Milky Way. He's lying on a bed of milk.
Right.
So verse 21 says, the unmanifested is also called the imperishable. So he's unmanifested Brahman, but he never dies. He's imperishable. It is said to be the ultimate goal. Those who reach it do not return. That is my supreme abode. That is Brahman's supreme abode. And the last one is, that supreme being in whom all beings dwell by whom all this is pervaded, is indeed attainable by unswerving devotion. So again, we go back to what we've done the last 89 episodes, that unswerving devotion. If you keep at it, you
Right.
will ultimately reach Brahman. But all of this was just a scientific way of saying, as you started off, Lou, saying, how much did our ancients know back then? How much did they know?
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, listen, if you're in the desert or you're at night in ancient times with no light pollution around you, you're going to see and notice the Milky Way, and you could see where lore would come from that, where people would start thinking about that. But this whole idea of revolving the galactic center and elliptical orbits and facing the galactic center, again, the galactic center is not observable. This was all incredible extrapolation by these people.
Yeah. And so many times I have thought about what exactly, how did they know that? Because when I said something to my son, who's a physician, about something like this, he said, well, they didn't even have telescopes back then. And what the scripture says, that you don't need scriptures, or you don't need telescopes to do this, that by intuition, people who put themselves in a state of meditation at the highest level of consciousness are able to discern facts, figures, the future, the past, as if they're actually there.
But think about how long after that humans believed the sun revolved around the earth.
Yeah, right.
Had that kind of extrapolation going on. This is an understanding. This is a deep understanding of the workings of the universe that seems incredible for the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're
Absolutely.
talking 11,000 BC.
Yeah,
They're pointing things at the galactic center, which again, they had to come up through intuition because it's unobservable.
it's
And
unobservable.
the movement around it, I mean, we revolve around the sun. I guess we could see where the sun rises towards the south and to the north and try to figure that out. But the revolution around the galactic center takes so long. There's no perceptible change there.
And they knew exactly how long it took.
That's
This
amazing.
is what Brophy said, is all of these times, the 4321, 432,000 years for one yuga, he said is exact. And, at some point during our field trips, maybe what we'll do is go through all of the different things that our ancients knew. And they knew the speed of light. They knew the exact number of seconds in a day, or how many days it took to make a year. To the ancient Sanskrit calendar has not lost a day. All of these Caesar or Gregorian, all of these calendars that they've made, as we talked about in our previous field trip, all of them have messed up. But that Sanskrit calendar goes on and on and on for thousands of years without a day being missed here and there.
And there's a credibility to the effect that the galactic center might have on humans because, again, we talk about the moon and the effect that it has. That's a gravitational force, which gravity itself is fascinating. But the biggest gravitational well is the center of the galaxy, right?
Yes.
It's a super black hole with more gravitational force than exists perhaps elsewhere in the universe.
That's right.
So
That's
it makes
right.
perfect sense that when we're exposed to it, it has some influence on us.
Yes.
Oh, all fascinating stuff.
So sorry, friends, about this long episode. Lou and I talked about it. I didn't think that I could do this justice if I broke it up into 2 episodes or 3 episodes. So I created one for it. And although it's long, I hope you will find it as fascinating as I have always found it.